Good afternoon, everyone. It's been great sessions today. Um, I'm Nir Barlev, and I'm the CEO of QuantLR. I'm actually a newbie, both to the company as well as to the industry. And this is, super exciting industry for me to be in. I'm a newbie to the industry, but throughout my 30-year career, I've actually been part of and have also influenced several trends and the building of new industries based on technological developments. Bluetooth being the first one in the early 2000s. Then at Google, I was one of the early members of the mobile team right after Google had acquired Android and was part of building the smartphone revolution. And most lately, as the CEO and co-founder of a company called ClearML, we were part of a handful of companies that built the MLOps industry, which is the industry behind powering all the tools that are needed to develop AI. So I wanted to use, my reflection from that to really share with you how I see QKD today, and really what I think is a turning point that's been happening lately, and a movement from what I would say is QKD 1.0 to QKD 2.0 on the development map of this industry. So QKD 1.0. QKD is really a super cool technology, right? It's a combination of physics, of quantum physics with, optic communication, with cryptography, and it was developed in the academia several decades ago, right? But nothing really happened because there wasn't any urgency in terms of the industry to adopt this, because the risk that it's working against, right, to build ultimate secure communication wasn't relevant at the time. But in the past few years, right, that risk has become visible over the horizon, and some would say actually already past the horizon. And we've seen more and more, governments getting behind this. We've seen large corporations, mostly telcos, build testbeds, and we've seen vendors actually starting to work with regulatory bodies on building standards. But at the end of the day, most of the vendors were really working on the basics, right? Which would be how far can I connect these systems, how fast the key rate, and really can I do this over shared fiber. Lately, there have been signals from the market that this is about to go to the next stage. First one is that there's a critical mass of governments, right, behind this industry, right? Especially the EU, less so in the US, and we'll talk about that later on. But there's, the EU is firmly committed to QKD, and we can see that through Euro QCI. We can see that through all the standards that are happening and being pushed in the EU itself, ETSI, ITU, etc. But more than that, in my conversations with customers, we've seen customers coming and complaining about the fact that standards are lacking. So this is not coming from the industry trying to push standards. It's coming from the customers saying standards aren't meeting needs for IPsec, MACsec, and layer 1 encryption. Standards aren't meeting the needs for standard fallback situations, or for multi-vendor QKD key management. And so there's a pull coming actually from customers who are already at the stage where they're thinking about implementing this in production environments and looking at the holes in regulatory standards. Singapore, another interesting development. The Singaporean government decided not long ago that it's going to network the full country. Yes, indeed, it's a small country, but still a countrywide QKD network. And all of the Singapore telcos are already actively working on building this. Not only are they building a countrywide QKD network, they're doing this with multiple vendors. Again, another sign of the beginning of some sort of maturation of the industry. And lastly, we're actually working with a Fortune 100 global company, a tech leader, that is about to put in a purchase order for hundreds of devices in 2024 for actual production situations. So I think all these are really testaments to what's happening in the industry. A little bit about QuantLR and how do we actually play in this change that's coming? So QuantLR is a small 4-year-old startup out of Israel with a strong background in academia. The most important thing about QuantLR is that from the get-go, it was about practical QKD at scale. Not about, so building basically on top of the innovations of earlier companies that have been focused on the basics of further, faster, but taking that and adding further innovations to focus on really the overall product envelope that you need to be able to support QKD networks at scale. Because for QKD, for the industry to be successful, you need to be able to address mass adoption at networks. That's where the market is. QuantLR has launched a generally available product earlier this year. There's a couple other products addressing specific link profiles. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it has actually been working with customers and design partners for a better of 2 to 3 years. And we've learned a lot from that and really how to build systems that are coming in for the age of QKD 2.0. Two customers, two big customers I'd like to mention. We're working closely with the Israeli defense community, with multiple arms in that community, and they've been helping us a lot. And also with said global Fortune 100 company, which for NDA reasons I cannot mention. And both of these organizations have been pushing us a lot. So what have you learned from them on how to build scalable QKD systems? So not all QKD is created equally. There are really two critical aspects that we need to address. It's not just about implementing QKD as the ultimate security. It's really about that envelope of product features that are needed for mass adoption. And we can sum them up at usability and security as kind of like the two titles for that. Let's dive a little bit into both. For usability, so first and foremost, it needs to be reliable. These are things that are going to go into telcos. They need to work day and night. Call them telco grade, call them 5 nines, same thing. As one telco customer said, it just needs to work. The second thing is simplicity, plug and play, right? Although, this is quantum physics, at the end of the day, the people are actually going to take these boxes and put them in the data centers. Our locations are communication technicians, right? It needs to plug and play. They need to be able to handle these systems just like they do with the rest of the communication equipment that they're used to be working with, and being able to use well-known and trusted software, software interfaces, etc. Cost effectiveness is another big item, right? And this is where it's important to understand that not all links are created equally, right? There are links differ significantly in terms of their profiles, right? They're different in the distance that you need to traverse, the traffic bandwidth, or the key rate that needs to be addressed in that. Thank you. The criticality of that link, right? I mean, is it a backhaul link that's carrying data for thousands of customers, or is it the pawn at the edge? Even the aggregated optical power changes on different links with different devices used to send the communication, not the quantum communication, but the general communication there, that the QKD system needs to be aware of and address. And there's also different optical channels being used, especially at PON. And so, for QKD to be massively adopted and lower prices, you need to take into consideration cost effectiveness depending on link profiles. Last but not least is management, right? Again, think of NetOps. NetOps in a large telco they need to manage lots of equipment. They have existing tools and software tools at which they do that. QKD systems at a higher level must integrate into these management and maintenance solutions such that it's easy and simple for NetOps to continue management. Excuse me. So, usability at QuantLR. First and foremost, we talked about the fact that the company is working on practical solutions for scalable devices. And so the first decision that the company made was to focus on building a usable solution for the most common link profiles, those being the shorter range profiles. This is, and if you build a system like that, you can drastically lower the price tag for those systems, and you can reach mass adoption. Additionally, we've added features from day one that address other aspects of usability that we just talked about, like remote management, like any Alice connecting to any Bob, so you can just pull it out and put it back in by the technician, and you don't need to worry about factory couples, auto recovery, and from power downs and other situations, etc. The second item we talked about for this to be mass adopted is security. And here, I guess at the basic level, we need to remember that the security provided by QKD isn't the theoretical, physical properties of QKD being, ultimate security. It's really about the actual engineering, design, implementation of that QKD system. That is really the attack surface of a system, and that really what decides how secure that system is. And one way to think about security is to look at the NSA with their position paper on why, today they prefer PQC. And they've given 4 key critiques. First, the fact that QKD requires specialized hardware, and as a result of that, it is prohibitively expensive for many use cases. Second, that it has limited range, right? So it can't support lots of use cases. The third is that when you're thinking about this from a security perspective, you're creating a new vulnerability, which is how do you handle the supply chain? You've got lots of parts that you need to source from vendors. Does that create a new threat? And the last one is the insider risk. So if you think about software-based encryption, really the only problems are at the endpoints, right? There's nothing happening in the middle. But with QKD, because of the range limitation, right, you've got hops and then you've got trusted node in the middle. And in any one of those trusted nodes, you can potentially, right, unplug an RJ45 cable and put something in, and you're able to tap into the information. So that's a potential risk that needs to be taken into consideration. So ahead of QKD 2.0, let's rethink about security and those critiques by the NSA. So the first one is specialized hardware. True, specialized hardware is more expensive, but there's 2 big things happening there. First, as with any hardware, as we get into mass production, prices are going to go significantly down. The second thing is, again, most of the vendors to date have been focused on faster, further, right? But we need to remember that if we build cost-effective solutions optimized for the specific link profiles, we are able to lower that price drastically. Again, we talked talking about QuantLR. We've been focusing on the 80 kilometers below range because that's where 95% even more of the links are, and that's where you can get a drastically lower price. In addition, we talked about limited range. So first of all, we need to understand how big of a problem that is. Looking at those numbers, we understand that yes, you ideally want to get to 100% coverage, but if you're getting 90% coverage, that's a good stage to be in. In addition, obviously, there are additional solutions to range. We've seen satellites, and Airbus discussed that earlier today. We talked about superconducting nanowire detectors just a couple of sessions before. QuantLR, for example, can connect easily to an external superconducting nanowire detector to increase the range to hundreds of kilometers. 800 kilometers have been demonstrated already. And then also when you think about a network, right, think about mobile roaming, right? When you move from one telco to another, a lot of cases, if you've got that situation and you can actually link multiple chains across different telcos, the number of situations where you do still need a long-range link goes down even further. In terms of the supply chain vulnerability, the nice thing about QKD is that it is not security by obfuscation, which is oftentimes what happens with software, right? In fact, you can take a QKD system, this QuantLR system, break it all apart, and source those modules from other vendors, put them back together, and it'll still work, and there is no compromise in terms of the level of security. In terms of the insider risk, as a general rule, and coming from the software space most of my career, the software threat level in terms of the attack surface is much higher than it is for a hardware solution, encryption solution. So, yes, there is added risk of insider attacks, but that doesn't even get to the level of threats from software envelope attacks. In addition to that, QKD shouldn't be considered as an only solution, right? It should be layered with PQC or other software encryption solution. It can be layered below or above these solutions that exist already today. And so that additionally reduces the insider risk. And the last one is that there are specific solutions that are being built to address that. For example, at QuantLR, we have an Alice and Bob combined solution, one unit solution, and one use solution, which means that for the insider risk to actually happen, one would need to physically break into the box, because it's not two boxes connected together. It's a single box in every one of those secure nodes. And that requires, that is much more difficult to do and requires someone with much more understanding of how to do that. And so that risk is reduced even further. So, summing everything up, we're seeing, I think, a big enough mass of governments that are supporting QKD and committing lots of money. We saw that in the AT&T presentation, and the amount of money that's going into this. We're seeing trailblazing customers, as mentioned, that are already not waiting for regulators, but are looking to actually implement QKD in 2024 in production. And we're seeing vendors such as QuantLR, but not only, that are focused on the next level of features and product, what I'd call product envelope, that are required to take the industry to the next level, which would be cost effectiveness, usability, and security. Thank you very much. I think we have a couple minutes for questions, and if not, you can find me later or tomorrow, or reach out to me in my email. Thank you.
Any questions, please? I'll go ahead and start. Nir,
Sure.
I think you mentioned you guys are about to deploy some of these. You said NDA, so I don't want to pry into the details, but do you see this actually kind of testing this hardware out kind of in the marketplace in limited scale it will be here soon?
So if you're asking about some of our solutions, we've already tested that, and we're about to deploy them with a couple of customers in production. So it's not a test bed anymore, it's actual production.